Hannah 7, officially designated New Sol Annex, was a quiet colony compared to the heavy industrial worlds closer to Earth. Its population, just over 4 million, lived among terrace farms, clean river towns, and cities designed more for families and corporations. In the early hours of morning, fog rose across the valley fields as school gates opened, market stalls were set up, and shift workers boarded their buses. Captain Min Jae-ho watched the sunrise from the observation windows of Orbital Command Station Echo 4, 300 kilometers above the planet. At 43, with streaks of white creasing his black hair and eyes worn from years of patrol duty, he had adjusted to the monotony of peace. Peace meant routine reports, maintenance requests, and small disputes with mining fleets. He took a sip of bitter, reheated coffee, something he was used to complaining about. His wife, Yeri, had messaged him earlier, sending a picture of their 10-year-old daughter, Senna, practicing piano for next week's school celebration. Their son, Doyen, was obsessed with racing drones. He'd begged for a new model again in her message. Min had responded half joking, half promising. Normal family things. Next door in the research block, Min's younger brother, Lieutenant Min Junho, manned the biological analysis lab. He studied non-aggressive alien fauna, excited by small discoveries that never made headlines. They sent each other teasing messages every few days. Junho liked to remind his brother that science did more to protect humanity than guns ever would. Min Jae-ho would pretend to disagree, but the truth was that he wanted to believe him. No one expected war. Not here. Hannah 7 was a soft target, and soft targets felt safe. Lieutenant Mira Sun, the youngest pilot in the colony fleet, sat at her console reviewing flight patterns. At 25, she believed in the Galactic Pact, a promise of shared technology, open trade, and conflict resolution. She quoted it like scripture, insisting the galaxy was evolving past its violent past. That belief ended at exactly 12:04 p.m. local planetary time. Without warning, sensors detected space-time distortions. At first, Min Jae-ho assumed it was a cargo fleet miscalculating an FDL approach vector. He was about to send a reprimand request when the station shook violently. Coffee spilled across his desk. Alarms erupted. Red emergency lights flooded the room. On the main screen, over 200 warships materialized above Hannah 7, their hull markings unmistakable. The core Dominion fleet, a rising militaristic empire known for territorial rigidity and unpredictable diplomacy. They did not send terms. They did not transmit a warning. They opened fire. Beams of ultraviolet plasma, designed to shatter reinforced armor, struck civilian population centers first. Not communication arrays, not defense bunkers, housing districts, hospitals, schools. The attack pattern was mathematically precise. Maximum initial civilian annihilation. Jae-ho's voice didn't break. Military discipline conditioned him to act, not panic. Evacuation order. Full planetary broadcast. All pilots, scramble. All orbital batteries, return fire. His voice stayed calm, though every second felt like a blade pressed his mind. Mira-san ran to her fighter dock. The squadron scrambled. They knew they wouldn't win. They went anyway. Tears streamed down her face only after her visor closed. Duty required silence. On the research platform, Junho watched through reinforced glass as fire rained across Hannah 7. Buildings became molten silhouettes. He tried calling his brother, screaming into the comms, but the channel was choked with emergency wavelengths. Down below, Senna and Doyen were at school. The defense fleet consisted of 12 ships, patrol frigates and outdated corvettes meant for piracy deterrence, not war. They launched anyway. They didn't ask for orders. They didn't ask for odds. Soldiers learned long ago, you defend your home until you're dead. The battle lasted less than 3 hours. The core Dominion's fleet suffered minor damage. Humanity's defense presence was erased. Mira's son survived by accident. Her fighter was hit, systems destabilized, and she spun into a debris field, powerless, floating helplessly as she watched Hannah 7 burn. Through a cracked canopy, she saw the oceans boil under orbital bombardment. Forests turned to black smoke. The atmosphere glowed a sickening red. The colony died in a single afternoon, Captain Min's orbital station didn't explode. It depressurized instead, leaving pockets of crew suffocating until emergency bulkheads sealed. Those who lived drifted in despair, surrounded by fractured metal and distant screams over failing comm lines. Min never learned how his children died. There were no remains to bury, no graves to visit. The core fleet ensured nothing recognizable survived. 6 hours later, a lone shuttle piloted by Lieutenant Junho found the station among shattered platforms and drifting corpses. When he discovered his brother alive, he sobbed in relief. Min didn't hug him back. He simply stared at the scorched planet below. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. There were no tears left to give the dead. Hannah, 7, had been a peaceful colony. It never threatened anyone. That truth wouldn't matter. In the days that followed, the Galactic Council issued condolences, recommending investigation, compensation, reparations, and a mutual mourning period. They suggested humanity seek healing instead of retaliation. They expected silence. They expected compliance. They had gravely misunderstood something fundamental. Humanity's peace was a choice, not a weakness. Humanity didn't mourn. Humanity took note, and humanity began to plan. In the weeks after Hannah 7's annihilation, humanity did not issue threats, declarations, or demands. There were no angry broadcasts, no retaliatory strikes. The news channel spoke carefully, avoiding speculation. Families grieved in private. Funerals were held without bodies, and what few videos survived the attack circulated silently through encrypted networks. Politicians gave statements about restraint, investigation, cooperation with the Galactic Council. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like humans were wounded and passive. To humans, silence was strategy. Earth's Unified Security Congress met behind sealed doors, protected by counter-surveillance AIs that erased audio every 30 seconds. The meetings stretched for days. Officers, scientists, generals, and civilian leaders watched satellite footage, reviewed tactical breakdowns, and analyzed political reactions from neighboring empires. No one raised their voice. Fury was too controlled for noise. At the center of the table sat Admiral C.O. Warren, commander of strategic development. 61 years old. Her posture was rigid, her hair tied in an iron-gray knot. She had spent her whole career planning for wars humanity hoped never to fight. Now she knew her work would determine whether humans remained prey or became something else entirely. Retaliation without preparation, she said, is suicide. We don't just need weapons. We need leverage. And we need to choose which war we are fighting. A young representative objected. We can't wait years. The public won't stand for her. The public will stand for whatever protects their children, Warren replied. Revenge without victory is merely grief with more funerals. There were no further objections. Earth, Luna, and Titan industrial sectors silently retooled their factories. Consumer robotics lines converted to automated artillery assembly. Hyperspace cargo bays emptied to accommodate weapons shipments. Children's toy factories began producing circuit casings for missile guidance systems. Hospitals stockpiled supplies for battles that hadn't happened yet. Humanity did not switch to total war overnight. It did something harder. It began to hide total war. Civilian analysts vanished from universities, transferred to government research programs in classified zones. Mining operations on Europa and the asteroid belt increased output by 900%, their cargo labeled as critical fusion components. Probes disappeared into dark space, carrying modular ship armor prototypes. Everything happened legally, carefully, quietly, and yet some things could not be hidden. On Titan shipworks, in a hangar sealed behind 3 identity checkpoints, Engineer Park Shingyu stood in front of a vessel that was not supposed to exist. Short, owl-eyed, and perpetually unshaven, Shingyu had led propulsion research for years, always underfunded, always told that his concepts were too experimental, too destabilizing, or outside treaty allowances. The core Dominion had shattered those treaties. Now there were no allowances. Admiral Warren stepped into the hangar, accompanied by military engineers. The room smelled of metallic dust and heated polymers. Before her stood a ship unlike traditional human designs. Matte hull, minimal heat signature, asymmetrical body, designed to confuse scanners. Half the vessel was weapons. The other half was engines. "Name?" Warren asked. Shingyu hesitated. "Unofficially, the Black Spine." He tapped the console, bringing its internal systems diagram online. "This ship violates at least 7 treaty restrictions. Hyperspace ripple drives, vector shifting armor, low signature plasma catalysts. It can appear in close orbit before enemy sensors detect it. It wasn't built for fleet battles." "What was it built for?" the Admiral asked. Shingyu's expression was hollow, resigned. "It's built to kill governments, not armies." Warren nodded. For the first time since Hannah Seven's destruction, she allowed herself to feel something. Not satisfaction, not pride. Necessity. "We'll need more," she said simply. Training centers on Mars and the Jovian moons filled with conscripts. They were not promised revenge. They were promised a long, difficult burden. Lieutenant Mira Sun, recovered from her injuries and reassigned, stood before a class of pilots barely old enough to drink. "You're not here to die heroically," she told them. "Heroes lose wars. Survivors win them. You will learn to kill only what must be killed, and to leave everything else standing." A cadet asked quietly, "Why leave anything standing after what they did?" Mira looked at the young faces, remembering the flames over Hannah 7. Remember her own tears trapped inside her flight suit. "Because if we destroy everything, we become the thing we're fighting. And then we lose something more important than a war." The cadet nodded. Understanding would come later. Across human space, grief sharpened into mathematics, logistics into weapons. The core Dominion continued its expansion, confident that humanity was broken. They received trade congratulations from 3 empires. The Galactic Council issued insincere apologies. None expected resistance. The Dominion occupied Hannah 7 space, set up mining drones over Glass Planet, and declared it a reclaimed sector. They believed humans lacked the capacity to strike back. They believed humanity was afraid. They believed humanity would compromise to survive. They believed peace had made humans soft. They did not understand one truth. Humanity had not forgotten war. Humanity had simply been waiting for a reason to remember it. In an encrypted storage cell deep beneath Earth's Defense HQ, Captain Min Jae-ho finally spoke after weeks of near silence. He sat across from Admiral Warren, eyes devoid of the man he had once been. "You're appointing me to lead ground operations," he said. It wasn't a question. "No one knows their tactics the way you do," she replied. "You saw everything firsthand. You'll help us understand how they break worlds." He leaned forward. "No," he said. "I'll help you learn how to break empires." Admiral Warren did not smile. Only fools smiled at war. The planning had ended. The building would begin. 2 years passed with no retaliation. Outsiders believed the humans were still grieving, still negotiating, still begging for recognition and justice. The Galactic Council encouraged ongoing diplomatic patience. News anchors and alien broadcast networks called humans resilient pacifists. Analysts argued humanity would accept territorial losses in exchange for security guarantees. Meanwhile, human shipyards double production every 6 months. The core Dominion misread silence as surrender. They continued their campaigns deeper into neutral territory, absorbing smaller species through intimidation and security partnerships. Their fleets grew faster than their logistics, consuming resources they didn't yet control. They assumed humanity was too weak to resist, too small to matter. They didn't notice that their ships began to disappear near the boundary of unclaimed space. Not destroyed, just missing. In a cold region beyond mapped hyperspace lanes, the experimental vessel Black Spine hovered without lights, hull blending into cosmic shadow. Captain Min Jae-ho, dressed in black combat rigging rather than traditional uniform, stood over a tactical display. His body had healed, but there was a hollowness in him that made subordinates speak softly, almost reverently. "Contact in 20 seconds, his operations chief whispered. "Core supply convoy. 5 cargo freighters. 6 escorts. They'll merge into normal space here for cooling cycle." Min didn't answer immediately. He watched the stars slide like cold mercury across the viewport. His hand stayed behind his back, steady, unwavering. Board them, he said. Do not open fire unless they resist. Secure flight crew. Leave civilian technicians alive. The boarding teams didn't cheer, didn't smile. They simply prepared their gear. A squad leader approached Min. Sir, what if we detect military command personnel? Min's voice was as calm as deep water. Then we arrest them, alive. Every Dominion officer must stand trial. We'll not hand them the mercy of a quick death. The squad leader nodded. There were worse fates than being killed in battle. Facing justice would be one of them. The black spine phased into partial visibility beside the convoy. A ripple in hyperspace cracked the silence, and then human strike pods launched, small, stealthy, precision-guided. They latched onto Dominion hull plates, cut through without triggering alarms, and deployed soldiers who moved like shadows in pressurized armor. It took 31 minutes. 6 ships surrendered intact. 5 were captured without a single casualty. The 6th vented its own bridge into space before the humans broke through. Self-destruction was a doctrine of officers who feared capture. The humans retrieved the bodies, cataloged their ranks, stored them for identification, and cleared the ship for transport. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. Months later, Dominion admirals noticed missing convoys. Fuel shortages began hitting their border fleets. Manufacturing delays slowed deployment. Discontent grew among their military. Whispers of incompetence spread through command sectors. No one knew the humans were responsible. That was the point. Humanity wasn't fighting a war yet. It was tightening a noose. On Mars Training Zone 12, Lieutenant Mira's son watched recruits attempt evasive flight with unmanned drones. She had become a specialist instructor in unpredictable combat patterns, teaching how to fight asymmetrically against militaries larger and richer than humanity. The young trainees didn't fear death like she expected. They feared fighting poorly, feared failing the people killed on Hannah 7. During a debrief, one pilot asked, "When will command let us strike back properly?" Mira studied the group. They looked at her as if she represented vengeance itself. "You already are," she said. "Every convoy we capture, every code we break, every factory we slow, every ship we delay, that's war. War isn't always explosions. Sometimes it's exhaustion. We will bleed them before they ever face us." Another asked, "When the real war begins, what then?" Mira didn't answer right away. She remembered floating, staring at a burning world through a cracked visor. "When it begins," she said, "you won't be fighting for revenge. You'll be fighting for the next colony that would have burned if we'd done nothing." That shifted the room. Grief turned to conviction, not rage. Rage was dangerous. Conviction could endure. In a secured research vault under Europa's ice crust, Xingyu presented new prototypes to Admiral Warren. Not sleek dreadnoughts, not planet killers. Instead, compact strike frigates, modular drones, and a newer design resembling a spine of shifting black plates. "This one isn't fast," Xingyu warned. "Not heavily armed either. But once it attaches to an enemy ship, it hacks their systems. Navigation, comms, weapon targeting. Think of it as a parasite that doesn't kill the host, just paralyzes it." Warren nodded appreciatively. "This allows capture instead of destruction. Capture generates intelligence," Xingyu added. "Destruction only generates debris." The Admiral's expression hardened. "We will take everything from them. Knowledge, resources, personnel, weapons. Everything they use to break us. We will make them understand cost." Captain Min sent his next report not to the public, not to the council, but solely to the Human War Board. Stage 1 complete. Dominion logistics compromised. Fleet starvation predicted in less than 18 months. Recommend escalation to Stage 2. He signed it with no ceremonial flourish. War was not an event. It was a sequence. And humanity had only finished the first step. The galaxies still mocked humans, still underestimated them, still believed they were fragile. They would learn soon enough. Humans do not strike quickly. Humans strike until nothing remains to strike. 18 months after the first convoy disappeared, the core Dominion military reached a tipping point. Ammunition shortages turned routine patrols into ration flights. Fuel logistics became unpredictable. Crews waited weeks for replacement parts that normally arrive within days. Shipyards slowed production, claiming supply inconsistencies. Civilian merchants protested, demanding compensation for stolen or delayed goods. For the first time in a generation, the Dominion's command structure felt pressure from below. Yet no battlefields existed. No fleets clashed. No planets were besieged. There were no heroic last stands. Just problems, inefficiencies, and invisible losses. The Dominion responded by tightening control. They audited transport routes. They arrested suspected smugglers. They executed officers accused of negligence. Forced obedience replaced discipline, and fear replaced loyalty. A military built on ambition started to fracture under paranoia. They still had no idea who was bleeding them. In Earth's Secure Council chamber, Admiral C.O. Warren pointed to a projected graph on the wall, each data point representing months of analysis and intercepted reports. "This is what a collapsing empire looks like," she said. Around her sat intelligence officers, strategic analysts, and a few key political leaders. Captain Minjaho observed from the side, not as a representative, but as an advisor. "We continue the pressure. We avoid open conflict, and within another year, their fleet will be unable to sustain long-distance operations." Warren continued. Then, "A decisive strike?" a minister asked. Warren shook her head. "No, a decisive strike is what they expect. We don't crush them. We disarm them." Humans didn't want to topple another empire into chaos. A broken empire could lash out desperately, taking millions of civilians with it. It could leave warlords in its ruins, create uncontrolled factions, produce a decade of instability. Humanity wasn't seeking destruction. They wanted control and accountability. Captain Min spoke for the first time. "We target command, not infrastructure, not colonies, not civilians. Only those who authorize genocide." He paused, voice cold and steady. "Those who give the orders, not those forced to follow them." It was the same logic he'd repeated for 2 years. He could no longer feel anger, only purpose. The second phase began with a broadcast sent on open spectrum channels to core fleets, civilian networks, and government halls. The transmission showed the face of Ambassador Han Seol, humanity's foreign envoy before Hannah Seven's fall. Her words were simple, calm, and undeniable. "We know who ordered the attack. We have the documents. We have the communications. We have recordings sent between your war council and your parliament weeks before Hannah Seven was destroyed. You called it a demonstration. We call it murder. Surrender those responsible to face trial, or your military starvation continues." She did not threaten attack. She did not shout. She merely presented information. Across Dominion space, shock rippled through political sectors. Families of military workers, who had endured shortages for months, took to the streets demanding answers. Protests erupted on 7 industrial worlds. Government officials insisted the broadcast was fabricated, but the words sounded weak even to themselves. Too many internal failures aligned with the accusation. The Empire tried to intercept rising unrest, but unrest breeds faster than suppression. Captains of 2 border fleets refused a patrol order, claiming insufficient resources. One governor halted shipments until the government proves it is not lying. Some protested peacefully. Others demanded blood. Corps leaders had expected to fight enemies they could point guns at. They were unprepared for enemies who fought with information. Phase 2 continued. The Black Spine and its stealth counterparts captured 3 more command ships in the next 6 months. Their officers were sedated, transported, interrogated, and held for trial. Not executed, not tortured, merely held, with evidence stacked higher by the month. It drove Dominion loyalists insane. If humanity had simply killed them, they could call them martyrs. Instead, they were forced to face what they had done, forced to hear recordings of themselves ordering destruction, forced to witness the names and ages of those who had died on Hannah 7. This was not vengeance. It was exposure. Exposure cracked empires faster than war. On Luna Station, Lieutenant Mira's son prepared new flight squads for the inevitable shift in tactics. "We don't dominate space with firepower," she lectured, "but with precision. When we strike openly, it will be fast, controlled, and minimal, A trainee asked, "What happens when the Dominion finally realizes we've been bleeding them?" "They'll panic," Mira said. "And panicked militaries make mistakes. Large ones." She didn't smile. War wasn't satisfying. It was exhausting. Necessary. Cold. Finally, the Dominion leaders responded. Not with surrender, but with desperation. They attempted to consolidate their entire command fleet, calling in ships from across their empire to form a centralized armada. That was the mistake humanity waited for. You cannot centralize what you cannot supply. Ships from famine-affected sectors mutinied rather than travel. Crews sabotaged engines to avoid deployment. Some fleets arrived half-crewed. Others defected to the nearest neutral border. In a single quarter cycle, the Dominion military lost more ships to internal revolt than to combat. Admiral Warren received the final confirmation from Intelligence Command. She forwarded it to Captain Min with 2 words. Stage 3. Min Jae-ho stood from his console, his voice barely lifted above a whisper. Release the proof to the galaxy. Humanity took its gloves off, not with bombs, but with truth. The broadcast began. The Dominion screamed. And across the galaxy, for the first time, nations feared not humanity's anger, but humanity's patience. When the proof went public, it did not come in the form of a dramatic reveal. There were no banners, no anthems, no triumphant speeches. Humanity uploaded millions of files, communications, tactical directives, budget authorizations, surveillance records, war council transcripts, dated, verified, authenticated, and cross-indexed with civilian casualty data. It took 37 minutes for every government in the galaxy to download them. It took 6 days for the truth to spread through the core Dominion. In those 6 days, 3 things happened. First, civilian outrage struck like oxygen in a vacuum. Instant, unstoppable. Anti-government demonstrations erupted in capital cities. Workers refused to repair military transports. Civilians attacked recruitment centers, shouting, "You burned them. You lied." Second, multiple provincial admirals demanded the apprehension of high command officials. Many claimed ignorance, desperate to survive the political firestorm. Some truly hadn't known. Others simply wanted to avoid execution by angry mobs. The third event defined history. 11 corps commanders defected. They didn't flee to another empire. They surrendered to humans. The first defecting commander was delivered to a human border outpost in a battered civilian transport. His crew insisted on being treated as refugees, not prisoners. The officer, General Vartes, had commanded secondary fleets but lacked direct authority during the Hannah 7 assault. He had demanded record access after the broadcast. What he found destroyed any loyalty he had left. When Captain Min Jae-ho arrived to interrogate him, Vartes did not demand protection. He did not plead for mercy. He begged to testify. "You must understand," the general rasped. "The attack was not about borders. It wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. They wanted to test your thresholds. They believed that if you were broken early, you would serve them willingly. Humanity was never meant to be destroyed. You were meant to be domesticated." Min watched him carefully, expressionless. He could not even summon anger anymore. That fire had burned out long ago, replaced by something quieter and sharper. "You will stand trial," Min said. "I insist on it," Vartes replied. Trials began on a neutral station chosen by the Galactic Council, who now cowered behind diplomatic protocol. They didn't want to be seen sheltering war criminals, nor could they risk angering the humans by interfering. So they stepped aside, pretending neutrality, while shaking in their bureaucratic seats. The tribunal was open, transparent, translated into 26 major galactic languages. No death sentences were issued. Humanity refused. War criminals were sentenced not to execution, but to lifetime witness duty, forced to read records, answer for decisions, testify against their own colleagues. They became living evidence. Their confessions were mandatory curriculum on 77 worlds within 10 months. Humanity did not demand reparations. They demanded accountability. And for the galaxy, accountability was far more terrifying than destruction. Not everyone accepted the trials. Some Corps loyalists attempted assassinations, bombing attempts, naval rescue operations. They failed, not always because of human defense, but because other Corps officers stopped them. The Dominion wasn't fighting humanity anymore. It was fighting its own conscience. Lieutenant Mira's son witnessed this shift when a Corps strike team tried to seize a trial witness in transit. Before they struck, a rival Corps faction ambushed them. The firefight left 10 dead. All Corps. Mira observed the aftermath with a heavy sense of finality. "This is what justice does," she murmured to her escort team. "It doesn't kill you. It forces you to choose what you're willing to live with." Meanwhile, on Corps Prime, the Dominion government collapsed. Members of the War Council attempted to flee. One tried to negotiate asylum with a neighboring empire, only to be extradited to human custody by that same species, who feared becoming humanity's next target. The empire that once terrified other nations now found itself alone. The galaxy didn't rally to help the Corps Dominion. They avoided assisting it out of self-preservation. Humanity didn't threaten them. They didn't have to. Respect held them in place. Fear guided their obedience. In a private session aboard the Black Spine, Captain Min received word of the final captured conspirator, a strategist named Zaron, who crafted the logistics for the Hannah 7 assault. The man was old, frail, and defiant. "What do you want from me?" Zaron spat. "Revenge? Retribution? Do you truly believe this trial will change anything? Nations act. Species compete. Peace is fiction. You cannot hold us accountable for what nature demands." Min sat across the table, expression carved from stone. Nature did not order the destruction of children. Zaron scoffed. "Collateral? Nothing collateral about elementary schools targeted first," Min interrupted. "Nothing accidental about hospital strikes. You kill civilians to make a point. And humanity is foolish enough to cling to morality over pragmatism," Zaron said. "You have power now. Use it. Conquer the galaxy and spare your children from ever suffering as ours have. Don't lecture me. Become stronger than us." Min almost pitted the man. Almost. Power without restraint isn't strength. It's disease. Zaron sneered. "Restraint is weakness. You will learn this too late." Min stood, calmly signaling guards. The trial will show who history agrees with. Zaron's feet dragged as he was taken away. He had commanded fleets, but now voice was all he had left, and even that would serve human justice. For the first time, humanity had something stronger than weapons. They had precedent. They were rewriting what war meant, what victory meant, what consequences meant. They were setting a line in the cosmos. Children are not currency. Civilian lives are not leverage. Empires do not escape their crimes. Justice, not conquest, became the human threat, and the galaxy realized something far more unsettling than humanity's capacity for violence. Humanity wasn't out for blood. Humanity was out for order. 5 years after Hannah 7 burned, its atmosphere was breathable again. The colony had been rebuilt not with haste, but with precision. Scientists restored soil compositions. Engineers stabilized climate systems. Volunteers from across human space spent months laying foundation blocks. The new settlement carried a different name, Hannah Memorial Province. It had no central metropolis. There was no grand capital. Everything radiated outward from one structure, a silent black wall, engraved with 4,200,000 names. President Min Jae-ho, once Captain Min, walked along that wall in the early dawn, tracing his fingers across his family's names the way one checks for truth in a dream. His wife, Yeri. Senna, Doyen. The stone did not change under his touch. It never would. He didn't look like a war hero. No medals hung from his coat. He had resigned from military command after the first trials concluded. The nation elected him president not because he had fought, but because he had refused to use victory as a weapon. Many feared what a traumatized soldier might do with political power. They were wrong to fear his rage. They should have feared his discipline. Lieutenant Mira's son arrived at the memorial site around mid-morning. She no longer wore flight leathers. She worked with civilian aerospace programs, training pilots who explore rather than strike. When she approached Min, He didn't turn. She spoke softly anyway. "The council delegation is waiting on orbit," Mira said. Min exhaled, pale breath vanishing in the cold air. "Are they here to question us again?" "Not this time," she replied. "They're here to ask for help." Min finally turned, weary recognition in his eyes. "Help fixing the Dominion's power vacuum?" "Yes. Core splinter states are forming militias. Some colonies want independence. Others want anyone, to lead them. It's becoming unstable." Min nodded once. "I warned them." There was no triumph in his voice, only inevitability. You don't remove a government without preparing something to replace it. Mira hesitated. "Will we replace it?" Min faced the memorial wall again. "We won't build empires, but we will stop them from bleeding to death while taking civilians with them." The council had expected war for dominance. Humanity gave them something more dangerous: responsibility. Days later, President Min stood before representatives of the Galactic Council and several newly formed core regional governments. The meeting took place on orbit, neutral ground. "You want us to police your collapse," Min said quietly, "to secure your factions, to prevent insurgency, piracy, destabilization. You want stability? You want a safe transition?" The ambassadors answered cautiously. "We want to ensure that innocent lives are not harmed any further. We recognize humanity is uniquely capable of—" Min raised a hand, cutting through the flattery. "Humanity won't occupy your worlds. We won't manage your resources. We won't take your territory. We'll do only one thing." The core envoy trembled nervously. "And what is that?" "We'll teach you how to govern without cruelty." There were murmurs, shock, confusion. Min continued. "We will help construct justice tribunals, modeled on our trials. Transparent, public, fair. The guilty face consequences. The leaders who act ethically are protected. Your people will learn that power isn't a tool for terror." A council member asked, "What do you expect in return?" Min looked down at his hands, at the scars that weren't visible on skin. When he looked up again, his voice carried the weight of a grave. "I expect your children to live." No applause followed. No cheers. Only a tense, reverent silence. The most dangerous species in the room wasn't the one with the strongest weapons. It was the one that had learned to stop using them. Months later, those justice tribunals began. Human advisors worked beside alien judges. Transparency became a cultural export. Trials streamed to public networks. Families watched their leaders questioned under oath, not executed in secret. Humanity didn't bring peace. Humanity brought accountability, and peace followed because accountability made tyranny expensive. Core civilians began rebuilding ruined cities without fear of secret police. Former soldiers became witnesses, not martyrs. Civilian governments formed, not under human command, but under human scrutiny. Responsibility replaced obedience. It was slower than war, more painful, more permanent. When the first independent core government signed its constitution pledging protection of non-combatants, Mira's son and Shingyu, now chief technology advisor for the new council, stood beside President Min on a quiet observation deck overlooking the ceremony. Shingyu whispered, "If they break these rules later, will we strike again?" "Only if they forget what they learned," Min replied. Mira stared at him. "Do you think they'll remember?" Min's eyes drifted toward the stars, where fleets once hunted and burned. His voice was soft, but unshakably true. Memories built on fear disappear. Memories built on responsibility stay. We didn't destroy them. We forced them to live with what they did. And now, they'll build a future, knowing what the alternative costs. Silence settled between them, not heavy, not bleak, just real, honest. Later that evening, President Min returned to Memorial on Hana 7. He stood beneath the cold stars, reading names not as ghosts of the dead, but as foundations of the future. "Your lives mattered," he whispered, "not because we avenged you, but because the galaxy learned from you." He rested a hand on the stone and exhaled. No empire would ever look at humanity the same way again, not with arrogance, not with pity, not with fear of destruction, but with awareness. Humans were not the species that ravaged in grief. They were the species that remembered, the species that held others accountable, the species that chose justice with the precision of a blade. Humanity didn't hunt for blood. Humanity hunted for truth. And now, the galaxy understood the cost of crossing a line humanity would never allow to be crossed again.